Welcome to Shadow the Stereotypes podcast, where our intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models. So our intention is to shine the light and showcase men of color who are doing some amazing things in the world. And so joining me today is Jason Rosario, who is one of those guys who's doing some amazing things. So it is my honor and privilege to welcome him to Shadow the Stereotypes. Jason, how you doing today, my man?
How's it going, Michael? It is my honor, actually, for me to spend the next hour with you, kind of just chatting about life and all the things that we're talking about. It's always humbling for me when people want to hear my story and kind of about the work that I do. So thank you for making this opportunity available.
Well, one of the things that I do is I search out and try to find men of color like yourself who, in my opinion, are doing some amazing things, because obviously we can see all the negative stories and the negative narratives about Black men in society. And so when I find people like yourself who are making positive impacts, it's my job to try to bring us together and create a resource so men of color can have conversations and dialogues and just listen to and learn from our experiences. So again, it is my honor and privilege to have you here on the show. So before we talk about your organization, I want to begin with a couple of icebreaker questions. So first of all,
okay. Where I'm from, New York City, born and raised in the Bronx. Not sure if you've been to New York at all, but yeah, between the Bronx and Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights area. And still very much in the Bronx today. My mom still lives here, and it's home for all intents and purposes.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about your family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. The way I always start that is by kind of framing, the way I was raised. My mom is a single mom, raised 5 kids on her own and in the inner city. So that narrative isn't unlike a lot of young men that I grew up with, right? Unfortunately, a lot of us came from single parent homes. But my mom is a Dominican immigrant woman. And so she's kind of found her way as she was raising us. She was also growing herself. So really just kind of finding her way, and really gave us a lot of opportunities to be successful, whether it was signing us up to be in the after school programs or really making sure that we were on top of our academics. She was very, very keen on education as a way to get out of our circumstances. So I credit her for my career growth and career trajectory. I went to the University of Buffalo for my undergrad studies. And then several years later, after spending a few years in finance and in building my career, I decided to go back and obtain an MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business. So, my background formally, as it relates to my career, has been very much in finance and investment banking, most recently real estate finance. But, my upbringing was not unlike a lot of young men that I grew up with. And really, it was the foundation that really became eventually the inspiration behind the lives of men.
Yeah, and I share the same story. Single mom with 6 kids who instilled in me a simple attitude, and the attitude was anything was possible. My mom said to me at a very early age, anything is possible. So I definitely credit her with my success in a lot of different ways. So now, I get a lot of females that watch the show and listen to the podcast. So one of the things they'll send me is he married? Is he single? Is it complicated?
No, I am in a committed relationship. I've been in a relationship now for 3 years, and she is an amazing woman. And her name is Andrea. She's been super supportive, but she is just as beautiful inside as she is outside. So hate to disappoint, but yeah.
Now, you mentioned your mom, obviously, as an inspiration. So other than your mom, name a woman who inspires you.
I'm going to keep it inside the family, and I am surrounded by women in my family. I have a ton of cousins and aunts and sisters. I have 5 sisters, actually, 2 on my dad's side. And so I'd say out of all of those women, though, my grandmother probably inspired me the most, outside of my mom, of course, because of her strength and her her doggedness to kind of be successful, or in her own right. She came to this country after my mom brought her here, but in the Dominican Republic, where we're from, she was an entrepreneur, and she raised kids, right? So I'm the product of 5 on my mom's side, but she raised 8 children with not a lot. And so looking at that story, and as I kind of have learned about her journey, it's incredibly inspiring. And then when she came to this country, she wasted no time in getting her hands dirty and getting to work. And, really, I mean, that was just her character. She was a very strong woman. Sometimes that strength came across in a very harsh way, but full of love as well. And so she is hands down, may she rest in peace, but she is hands down, outside of my mom, my biggest inspiration.
Now, obviously, you put a lot of emphasis on the lives of men. So name a male role model who has empowered you and shaped you to be the man that you are.
Yeah, great question. And a lot of people don't expect the answer that I'm going to give you, but I'm going to say my dad. And my dad, and I just said, look, I was raised by a single mom. My dad wasn't in my life for large periods of time, but he was my biggest inspiration because of what he wasn't, right? And because of his absence. So he taught me a lot through his absence. He taught me about who I didn't want to be as a father, as a husband, as a man generally. So I think I absorbed a lot from him just by that experience. And then later on in life, we reconnected and we reestablished our relationship. I was able to forgive him for a lot of different things and realize that he was, at the time, now that I'm a father and at my age, I realized, even with my own issues, I can only imagine some of the issues that he was going through. So understanding that he did the best he could. So I thanked him for that. And I said, look, Dad, I know that you weren't around and for a large period of time, but that's okay. And I forgive you. And I thank you for that experience because it forced me to grow into the person that I am today. And I quite often, actually, I post on Instagram or on social media, pictures of me and him when I was a child saying thank you, right? And just really hoping that he's proud of me for the man that I've become. So my dad, hands down.
And that's a really powerful story. And I hope for the viewers that a couple of things I want to point out. Number one, you said you forgave your dad. And I know a lot of us, I didn't have a relationship with my dad for the most part. But like yourself, I was able to forgive him for the things that he didn't do. And it actually, I believe, made me a better father because I didn't say that I didn't want to be like him. What I said was, I want to be the best father I can possibly be. And I don't want to emulate it. So for me, he was an inspiration from that perspective also because I knew what I didn't want to be. And right. I grabbed that was by watching him. And I remember as a kid really missing, wanting to have that close father-son relationship. And unfortunately, I never really had. But it propelled me to be the best father that I could be. And despite the fact that I didn't have that role model, I took it upon myself to go to seminars, to read books, to learn what it took to be a great dad. And so we must understand that being a great father isn't genetic. It's learned behavior. So as you're watching this, if you've had a disconnection from your father, you can reconnect. Doesn't mean he has to be in your life, but you can forgive and move past it and still become a great father, regardless of what type of relationship you may have had with your dad. So just want to kind of.
And I think and that's a great point. And what I'd say to that, the key to all of that is understanding, right? And compassion. And you said it, you can reconnect and not necessarily want him in your life, but being able to understand and have compassion for the types of things that he might have been going through at the time will give you a different frame of reference. And then that can lead to forgiveness eventually.
Yeah, and there's a lot of healing that goes with that, which we may jump into just a little bit later. But the next question I want to ask, though, is name a book that's had a positive impact on your life.
Wow. I mean, I'm literally no coincidence. I see your bookshelf in the back, and I'm literally looking at mine right now, and a ton of books. It's hard to pick just one, but I'm probably going to pick maybe the most recent one that I've read. and that's Bell Hooks, The Will to Change. So as I do the work that I do around masculinity and understanding what that social construct is, and then eventually how I identify with that, or I don't, and try to kind of redefine that for myself, that book has really shaped a lot of the way that I view my work, and the way I view other men, for example. And one of the things that I've learned is about myself, just obviously through reading the book, but just also kind of in tune to my lived experiences. A lot of us that don't have male role models in our lives learn how to be men either by trial by fire, right, or trial and error, or by observing the men that we do have around us, whether they are aware of that or not. And sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of those men aren't the best examples. So that's I read a lot. I mean, that's one book. I'll tell you about another book. It's called To Be a Man, by Robert Augustus Masters. It's a really good book, fairly recent. But those books are incredible in terms of really introducing this topic of masculinity and manhood in such a way that's disarming, and also doesn't point the finger at men for being toxic or for being bad men. It's really, to your point about healing, it comes from a place of healing. How do we heal the internal traumas that we have that have informed the way we're showing up in the world? And that's what I like about those books. So 2 books, To Be a Man by Robert Augustus Masters and The Will to Change by Bell Hooks.
Fantastic. And again, one of the reasons that I do this podcast is I want to make sure that we break past that stereotype that Black men don't read,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Passionate about books. And so I try to learn from others and to get as much information and look for new resources. So thanks for sharing those.
Sure.
So if you like movies, name a movie that you love and tell me why you love it.
Oh, man, I don't know how relevant this is to the conversation. I'm not a movie buff by any means, but I like Coming to America. It's my favorite movie. I mean, that's what comes to mind. It's a comedy. It's Eddie Murphy at the height of his powers, and it's just an incredible movie. So I'd say Coming to America.
Classic. It is an absolute.
Yeah.
I'm just a huge movie buff. That's my passion is books, writing, speaking, and movies. So
Okay.
So Jason, here's a question. What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? A lot. I mean, I'm into music. I love the game of basketball. I played some in high school and college, and so I try to get out from time to time whenever I can. I just like to be a tourist in my own city. New York City is the best city in the world in terms of just culture and getting lost if you want to or not. Tons of museums. So I'm a history buff, so I try to go to museums often. I mentioned I read often. But yeah, I think it's just really getting out and about, and it's not going to sound fun, but the more I learn about myself and culture and the arts, that's fun to me. And that's what I do. Aside from traveling, of course, I enjoy traveling. So me and my lady jump on a plane anytime we get a chance to kind of disconnect and be outside the city from time to time.
Nice. Yeah. There are some people who are pessimistic about the future, and there are others who are optimistic. So where do you fall on the spectrum between optimism and pessimism for the future in general?
For the future in general, that's a broad question. I'm gonna try to answer it very specifically. So I'm an eternal optimist. That's just how I look at the world. I always look at the glass half full, half empty, and that's just who I am. So I think generally speaking, I'm optimistic because living in a time where we are the collective consciousness is raising, it's rising, for lack of a better term. So I think a lot of people are starting to become more aware of themselves and how they show up in spaces, and that's leading them to do an incredible amount of internal work. And that work can be spiritual, that work can be physical or metaphysical, however you want to frame it. But I think we're in space and time right now where there's a proliferance of people that are looking to examine themselves and grow from where they are. And then I think to give it a little bit more context, we're living in interesting times from a social political landscape. And when I look at the results of that and where we are today, I'd say that the one positive thing that came out of the 2016 elections is that platforms like myself, right, the Lives of Men like mine, and other platforms, or just people of color in general, are coming together and realizing that the powers that be are not going to take care of us. We need to do it ourselves. So I'm starting to see a lot of collaboration amongst young people of color, entrepreneurs, really coming together to make sure that we're helping one another. And there's a quote by Issa Rae that says, you know, we tend to network up, but what we should be doing is networking across, because you don't know who the next person is, the person that's in the trenches, fighting with you and kind of really trying to claw themselves a little bit of space to be better. Those are the people that we should be working with. So that, I think, is leads to my optimism, is that, you know, in the middle of all of this stuff, for lack of a better word, we're starting to see a lot of us come together more closely, and that's incredibly inspiring for me going forward.
Well, again, there are no accidents in the perfect universe, and the fact that we've been brought together, I'm absolutely certain of that. And I too am an optimist, and at the same time, I don't deny the challenges that are out there because they're pretty obvious. But the lens through which I see the world is very optimistic. And again, when I see people like yourself that are doing the things out in the world that you're doing, it inspires me. And it also challenges me to say, what can I do to be a solution? What can I do to not be a part of the problem? And so that's why I do this podcast, because I want to share and hopefully shine some light on people like yourself to let people see what's really going on. Because I don't remember where I read this, but there was a guy, one of these brainiac types, and he said a kind of pretty interesting statistic. He said, you know, the media only shows us 6% of what's going on around the world. 6% of what's going on around the world. He said, and of those 6%, he said 80% of it is negative. That's what drives our media. Sensationalism, negativity, pessimism. He says, if you can step back a little bit and take a bird's eye view, and there's lots of data that will back what he's saying up. The truth is, in my opinion, these are the best times ever. And so it comes back to what you were saying earlier. I believe consciousness is raising, and humanity as a whole is waking up. So that's one of the things that drives me, because I have a spiritual lens that I look through, and I see it from a collective. And I really believe that it's always darkest before the dawn. And so all this stuff that's going on with our presidency and all that chaos is actually a breaking point that I believe is going to open up to something really amazing. And that's just the lens I see it. So
yeah.
That being said, last question. Now, I want you to imagine that I've got this magic wand. And I'm going to give you this magic wand. And with this wand, you can create anything your heart desires. If I gave you that wand, what would your life look like 10 years from now?
Good question. I would probably create much more flow of opportunity to our young people by way of education. And specifically, I would create programs, perhaps even a school, but definitely curriculums that teach young people of color the truth about their history and about where they come from and about their lineage. I think that's incredibly important. When we look at our young people today, I think that there's just an overall lack of, there's no direction. They have no North Star. They don't know where they're going. And in large part, it's because they don't know where they've been or where they come from. We all know the proverb that says, know where you come from so you can know where you're going. I think that's really it. So teaching young people that their history, where they come from, that our history as people of color does not begin with slavery. We go back generations. We created the arts. We created mathematics and all of these things. So that's what I would want to do more of. And, I don't know if I need a magic wand to do that. I think there are a lot of people already doing this type of work. It's just we all need to kind of make sure that we're talking together and helping each other move forward. But if I could, with one stroke of that wand, create something like that, then I would.
Nice. Nice. Now, I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself professionally to the audience. So tell the audience about what you do.
Absolutely. My name is Jason Rosario, and I'm the founder of The Lives of Men, which is an integrated media and lifestyle company that focuses on being a resource to men of color as we navigate our life stages, different life stages, but also inside of the concept of masculinity and manhood. So what I like to say is that our work sits at the intersection of masculinity, identity, and self-actualization. So what does that mean? It means that we look at identity as a form of looking at who we are, as I mentioned, knowing who we are, knowing our history, knowing our full selves. Self-actualization is taking all of that and then trying to be our best selves in all the spaces that we occupy, whether it's in your professional life, in your personal life, within your relationships, etc. And then all inside of this concept of masculinity, right? Understanding that we perform masculinity, it's something that we're taught by looking at the media, by the men that have come before us. All of these habits and learned behavior around masculinity, stuff that we're taught. So how do you do all of that inside of those lenses? And so that's what I do with The Lives of Men. And I also work with a company called Oath around diversity and inclusion. So I do some work around that as well.
Now, with The Lives of Men, so do you facilitate workshops, or what exactly do you do logistically? What do you do?
It's a media company, so primarily content based. So we do, and content, I mean, not just videos and articles online, but we also do a lot of events and activations. So that's primarily our business, but the way we socialize our work and how we graduate those conversations around masculinity and bring it to life is by working with young men in New York City schools. So we are a licensed Department of Education vendor. And what that means is that we're able to contract with New York City high schools to bring programs and workshops to them that'll help supplement what they're doing inside the school. So we focus on workshops around mental health, racial injustice, restorative justice, financial literacy, technology training. So all of those things we bring together in the form of our workshops, and we bring those to New York City schools.
Nice. Nice. Now, I want to read something from your website that really sets the context for the rest of this conversation. And it says, "We are an integrated media and lifestyle company focused on chronicling the stories and diverse interests of men of color. The Lives of Men exists as a resource for men as we navigate various life stages. By embracing a feminist, inclusive perspective, our goal is to inspire, activate, and nurture the development of well-rounded men. Our work begins with the understanding that in order to become better men, we need to examine ourselves and how we show up in various spaces, family, community, professional, and social settings. As a result, our content, events, and consulting services focus on the development of a healthy understanding of masculinity and identity, and embraces vulnerability and self-reflection as basic building blocks. The journey of self-discovery and self-actualization doesn't have to be a lonely one. We invite you to #walk with us." Now, I love that. And I know that as someone who's been heavily involved with men's work for more than 20 years, first of all, I just want to applaud your work. But
Thank you.
I also know that when you say the word feminist, a lot of men will give you a lot of pushback about that. And so very rarely do you see men or hear men talking about being a feminist, if you will, but especially as a man of color. So I'm curious, what kind of pushback do you get when you use that term?
Ironically enough, I don't get much pushback. And that's because I think I try to explain what that means. And unfortunately, the stigma or the connotation that the word feminist has is that it's anti-male or it's anti-masculine. And we understand that there are different forms of feminism You've got the radical feminism that's very anti-male, you know, and it's very pro-women and women's rights. But I think true feminism is the centering of the lives of Black and brown women specifically. And I probably changed from feminist to womanist, right? Because womanist actually takes into account the lives of women of color. And that's just a term that was coined by Dr. Alice Walker, to kind of move from feminism to account for the cultural nuance. But the reason I say that is because it's important as men inside of a patriarchal system for us to acknowledge that patriarchy has worked in our favor for centuries. And so if we are to become better men, we need to center the lives of Black and brown women, and not just women. And that's why I say it's inclusive, because we need to embrace the LGBTQ community, right? Our you know, trans women, femme women. So all of the constituents and the fullest dimensions of who we are as men have to be at the forefront of our work so that we can be better men, you know, in its own right. And so that's where I think I like to graduate the conversation around feminism and really put a stake in the ground and educate folks on what that really means, because it does not mean anti-man. It does not mean anti-masculine. It really does mean inclusive, to be honest, in the truest sense of the word. Unfortunately, though, what we've seen are the extremes of that, right? We've seen patriarchy on one side, and then we see extreme feminism on the other side, and neither of those are inclusive by nature. So we want to try to be somewhere in the middle.
Now, of course, the big story in the news these days is the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation to the Supreme Court, despite the allegations of sexual abuse. So from your perspective, do you think that's a setback for women?
I mean, it's a setback for men. It's a setback for everyone, not just women. I think it's unfortunate that we still live in a country where 5 of the men that are appointed to the Supreme Court have had allegations of sexual misconduct on their record, right? And that's a shame. That's number one. Number two, it really makes you think about the system and kind of how it's set up, and the backlash that Brett Kavanaugh was feeling in terms of feeling attacked is just a form of privilege manifesting itself, right? So understanding that that's the world that we live in. So I think it's a step back, quite frankly, for all of us, for something like this to still happen. And then obviously, but you know, it's no surprise, right? We have who we have in office in the White House, and that's just the current state of affairs right now in our country. But we just need to empower ourselves to get more educated on the political system, understand that we have a significant responsibility to be participants in that, active participants in that political system, and not just at the presidential Senate level. It's at your grassroots local level, right? Know who your councilmen are, know who your mayors are, know who your representatives are, and then gradually up from there, because all of that counts. So, you know, I think it's a setback for all of us, and it's just a testament. It's what we saw in 2016 just continuing to perpetuate itself.
I agree wholeheartedly. And so since you and I are really committed to creating solutions to the problem versus adding fuel to them, I want to jump to this. Now, I've been doing men's work for 20-something years or so. And what I've come to know is that there are only 2 reasons or 2 causes that'll challenge a man to change. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent. It is that internal feeling that something's just not right. So how did you begin your journey into this awareness and this activist role, if you will, in men's work?
Great question. I think it has 2 answers, really. One is the more esoteric answer is that I think I was born into this, right? From as long as I could remember, I think I've always been on a journey of self-discovery and really growing. And when I look at my life in phases, I think every 5 years or so, I go through a transformation. And so that's just something that has always occurred in my life, is really a cycle of examination, implementation, growth, and then within that pain, right? But there's a constant cycle. But in terms of a very real or pragmatic impetus for me stepping out into the space is, as you said, pain, right? Whether it was a breakup, whether it was a loss of a job, whether it was, a death in the family, those things tend to push us forth in a way that really, really inspire us and get us on a path of substantive work, for lack of a better term. So that's really what caused it, is really me finding myself in a space in my life where I wanted to create and I wanted to give myself the medicine that I wish I had when I was a little bit younger, that would have helped cure or prevent a lot of heartbreak for myself, a lot of heartbreak for the people around me, and really just get to a point in my life where I was comfortable with myself and eliminate, and a lot of that actually eliminated or required the elimination of a lot of people in my life, right? So I had to edit a lot of people into my life and edit a lot of people out of my life. And that's just, that process continues. It's an ongoing one. But I think the combination of pain, fear, loss, and potentially living a life unfulfilled, all of those things for me were, you need to get on this.
And so again, that's one of the things that I coach men on, is to, first of all, be able to identify pain. Because I know I was on that societal roller coaster. I had a house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all that. And by society standards, I was pretty successful. And if you were to ask me, Michael, how's everything going? My automatic response was always, everything's great. Because I was in complete denial of a lot of the pain that I had been carrying, a lot of childhood trauma and all of that. And so, but it wasn't until my divorce, which was that what I call universal slap upside the head, that really awakened me to look a little deeper into who I am as a human being. And so when I first started this process, the only goal I had was to stop the pain. I needed to figure out how to stop that pain. So one of the first steps I took was to go to therapy and to start dealing with a lot of that suppressed emotional trauma that I experienced as a kid. And so my next question is, was there a specific event that kind of triggered you, or you've been doing, every 5 years, but did any one thing sort of slap you upside the head and challenge you to grow?
Absolutely. There was a breakup. It was a breakup. It was a very toxic relationship I was in for the better part of 7 years, and it was just it just got to the end of the line, and that I realized I learned a lot about myself coming out of that relationship, and I realized what I was giving and what I was getting in return. I also realized that I lost sight of myself at some point in that relationship, and really had to regain my control over my own destiny, my own life. And I'd also say that you mentioned something about stopping the pain. I don't never wanted to stop the pain. I wanted to step into it. I wanted to step into it further, because I felt like the pain was actually there to teach me something. And what I found was that the more I stepped into it, willingly sat in that pain, not dwelled on it, but really felt it, and then tried to kind of examine where it was coming from, I learned the most about myself. And I think that's one of the things that I think, and therapy, of course, was a primary tool in that process. But I think one of the things that as men we do isn't healthy is we tend to want to run or numb from the pain. And, whether it's, let's use the breakup example, what tends to happen is the type of advice that you get from your homies, from society in general, is, oh, well, you just broke up, great. Now you're free, go sleep around until you get over it and you'll find someone else, right? But you never really address what's happening inside you, what happened, what went wrong, what your role was in that, what her role was in that, and then try to heal those traumas before moving on. We don't do that as men, and I think that's part of the reason why I decided to approach this and launch this platform the way I did, because I'm sure I wasn't the only one going through what I was going through, and I wanted to, again, give myself the medicine that I wish I had when I was younger. So, pain, definitely a breakup, and then through therapy was able to come out on the other side of that.
Well, once again, I think this is why this podcast is so important, for men, especially men of color, to engage in this conversation because, as you mentioned, when we talk about masculinity and some of the ways we as men, regardless of ethnicity, deal with stuff, is traditionally, as you mentioned, our response generally to emotional pain, especially in regards to relationships, is let's just go get laid, and then that'll sort of alleviate, the pain that I may be feeling without addressing the real pain of that breakup. And so to engage men in a conversation about healing and growing through that pain, and I agree 100% that the only way out is through for men, and that takes a lot of self-introspection, and that takes a commitment to addressing their emotional and psychological and spiritual challenges that sometimes we aren't even conscious of. And so what we as men have to be willing to do is to become open-minded and self-aware. It is that self-awareness that we have to invest in so that we can witness, if you will, our participation in life and relationships. Because when we become aware, we can't change something we're not aware of.
Right.
When you look at relationships as a perfect example, I know when I went through my divorce, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I'll never get married again. And I made a commitment at one point that I would just have different women. And that's how I would be happy. That was a rationalization in my little head at 26 years old, right? Well, after several failed relationships and an accumulation of more pain, because every time I got in a relationship and it didn't work out, I wasn't aware of it at the time, it hurt even more. But then again, it got to the point where it was so intense that something had to shift. And that's when I gained the courage to go to therapy to look at myself. And here's an interesting story of how that came about. I was having a pity party with a female friend of mine. And in this pity party, I was saying, you women say you want a good man. Well, I'm a good man, but why are all these women leaving me? And I'll never forget what she said. She said, Michael, if one person calls you a jackass, you probably shouldn't worry about it. But if two or more do, you probably ought to get a saddle. And it was how she said it, and the person I respected her, so I didn't get defensive, but I literally heard what she said. And what she was basically saying was I was the only common denominator in all of her relationships. So I had to be willing to look at me, look at my part in failed relationships. And that's how one of my healing journeys began, which in terms of relationships. I had to be willing to take full responsibility for who I was being and how I was showing up in relationships. And it was challenging, it was difficult, but as a result of moving through some pain and some fear and some healing, I now have been blissfully married for the past 17 years to a woman who is absolutely perfect for me. I absolutely love being married. And there was a part of me that always knew that people could be happy in a marriage. And I simply committed to that. And fortunately for me, I was able to create that. So long story short, for the people who are watching, relationships always begin with you. You must be willing to do your inner work first before you can create a relationship with others. So, Jason, another question. Did you have an aha moment as you were going through this process about challenging the status quo for what it meant to be a man? Was there a light bulb that came on and you just went, man, maybe I don't know what it means to be a man? Did you have one of those moments?
I don't think there was one moment. I think it was an amalgamation of a lot of different moments and experiences and pain and triumphs and all of those things. So I can't say that it was one moment. It was just, the collective experiences that I had in my relationships with, what I've mentioned about my dad and him not being around, and then observing the women in my life and the decisions that they were making, and all of those things combined to say, you know what? I think for me, again, this was before I decided to put a platform out that was outward facing. This was all for me. Wow, I need to do some work and I need to do some healing internally. And then it just became, well, maybe I should offer this up to the world. And that's really what the Lives of Men is at the end of the day. It's my lived experience packaged in a way that other people can draw inspiration from. So, but no, it wasn't one particular instance.
You know, I had one instance where I remember I'd gone through the forest and I was in a really, really dark place. And I remember sitting up late one night and I remember just asking, what does it mean to be a man? Because I had done everything I thought a man was supposed to do to be a man and be happy, but I was absolutely miserable. And that question just started festering in my mind. What does it mean to be a man? And that was back in 1995. And so it was that question that propelled me on a journey to begin the process of understanding masculinity. And in doing my own work, like yourself, I wanted to figure out how could I share the lessons I learned with other men to help them alleviate the pain that I know they're dealing with, because I'm not the only man that's done it. So I fully resonate with what you're saying, because our stories are so similar. Now, you mentioned on your website the need for vulnerability. And I know that a lot of men, and but from a male perspective, men really struggle with vulnerability. So speak a little bit about how you perceive and express vulnerability.
I think vulnerability is the secret sauce that makes healing occur. And vulnerability with yourself first, right? Making sure that you are honest enough with yourself to know that, look, something's wrong. I'm not, there's something in me that's not right. And being able to look at yourself in the mirror and acknowledge that is the first step towards vulnerability. And then vulnerability with others is asking for help. When you are feeling a certain way, and that's, unfortunately, it's not something that Black men are very used to doing, is saying, yo, brother, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling depressed, and I don't know what to do. That's not something we're used to. But that, being able to do that, sets in motion a series of events that will lead to your healing occurring. So vulnerability to me is the absolute most important ingredient in healing and in doing the type of work that we're doing.
And so I will assert that the three most difficult words for any man to say is, I need help. And that's where it all begins. And so for the viewers, I want you to make sure that let's destigmatize that. If you are dealing with some pain, some struggles, and you're uncertain, unsure, confused, frustrated, whatever, there is no shame in simply saying, I need help. Because it isn't until you say those words to yourself that the transformation can begin.
Right.
So make sure that you're okay and you move past the negative stereotype and stigma that saying I need help is bad.
And I have three more words for you as well. You are not alone.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, another stereotype that we hear throughout the media, especially about men of color, is that we aren't capable of monogamy. So speak to that just a little bit. What are your thoughts around it?
Great question. It's not something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about from the standpoint of whether or not we're capable or not. I think we're capable of doing whatever it is that we set our minds to. But I think commitment is something that it's a learned behavior. It's something that it's not necessarily something you're born with. So if you subscribe to the notion that we're all animals, then we're dead in the water, right? Because men are supposed to spread their seed and women are supposed to nurture that. And, but I'm a big believer in that. Again, human beings are different than a dog or a fish or any other animal in that we have free will and the ability to choose and then follow through on that choice. So monogamy is very much a choice. You can choose to be faithful and monogamous, or you can choose not to. And I think that's really understanding that choice starts to put things into perspective.
Sure. Now, another stereotype in terms of relationships and families is there's this stereotype of the deadbeat dad. You know, if you say deadbeat dad, the first image that comes up in most people's mind would happen to be a man of color. Now, as a father of three children who absolutely loves and adores his kids and have definitely shattered that stereotype, what are your thoughts in terms of fatherhood?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that we need to do better as fathers, especially fathers of color. We need to be there. And, part of the reason President Obama started the My Brother's Keeper initiative was to address some of that. So I think, yes, we just need to do better as fathers but also realize that we're not perfect. And there is no perfect definition of what it means to be a father. And as long as you acknowledge that and try to put your best foot forward every time, that's the best you can do. And I would say do the best that you can with what you have. If you don't have much money, spend the time. If you don't have much time, make more time. I think it's just really about making an effort to be uh, the dad that you want to be, that you think you need to be, and forgetting about what other people's characterizations of what a good father looks like. And know that you're going to make mistakes. I'm making mistakes daily. That I'm a human being, right? And so just know that you're going to make mistakes. Forgive yourself for those mistakes and keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, remember and understand being a great father isn't genetic. Not in your genes. You learn.
It's also not just financial.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Right. So what I think a lot of us, and that's the downside, I think, of some men and their illusion of fatherhood, if I just buy them stuff, I'm being a good dad. The overwhelming majority of kids want you, not your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that vulnerability word is so important, because when we as men get to that place of connecting to our emotions, and those emotions are what open us up to connecting to our children. And when we connect to our children, we recognize that we don't have to have stuff to be connected to our kids.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't try to buy their love. We should want them to just love us for who we are. And the only way that can happen is if we open our hearts to them.
Right.
Real challenge for us as fathers, but it's doable. Again, I've done it. It wasn't easy, but I've done it. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm committed to it, and that's really, really.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another important aspect of success, if you will, is a positive support system. And I know that for most men, very few of them have a support system that really not only supports them, but challenges them to be the best men that they can possibly be. And I watched a few of your videos online, and I see that you've got a network of some men that you sort of connect with. So talk a little bit about the importance of that support system to support your growth.
Yeah, I think that's one of my three rules for success, and success being relative. But one of the rules is surround yourself with people that are going to inspire you, people that are going to hold you accountable and check you and tell you when you need to step up or when you need to do better. But also people that are going to prop you up when you're not feeling your best self, and all of that. And that is not just your friends, that's your family, it's your partner, whoever you choose to spend your time with. It's incredibly important to make sure that your circle of people is strong. And we've all heard the phrase, you are the average of the five people you keep around you. That's very true. That's one of the truest statements I've ever heard. And so if you think about that, think about the importance of that, then you'd be a lot more discriminate in terms of who you choose to be around you on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier where some people you have to let go of, some people you have to bring in. So it's a matter of getting that balance between those five people that's going to empower and support you to be your best self. So
yeah,
very, very powerful statement. So as we're winding down, boy, time flies when you're having fun. But I want you to speak to the men out there who may be trapped in that negative media narrative about me. And maybe they've given up or just have lost all motivation and they think, well, I just can't make it. I just, everything's stacked against me as a black man. What message do you want to send out to those men who may not believe that they can create what I'll call an extraordinary life.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy to kind of fall into the woe is me category. Oh, the man's out to get me, or I don't have this and I don't have that. And I think, yes, I mean we've known that for years and for centuries, is that the system is not set up to help us win. We have to do what we have to do, or what we can, to kind of make sure that we, inside of that system, become successful, whatever success means to you. But I would say the first thing is stop throwing a pity party for yourself. I think it's look at yourself in the mirror and analyze what haven't you done to get yourself to where you want to be, because it always starts with you, right? Regardless of what's happening outside of you, whether it's your job, your boss, your partner, your friends, if you are not doing the things that you need to do for yourself, then nothing outside of that is going to conspire in your favor. So look at yourself in the mirror, and only you know, are you waking up early enough? Are you doing that thing that's going to get you that job? Are you writing that paper? Are you putting your resume together? Are you networking enough? Are you going to church? Are you writing in your journal? Like, all of those things are self-directed things that you have control over. So I would say start looking at the things that you're doing and not doing, and take inventory of that, and start doing less of the things that are going to get you to where you want to go, and more of the things that you need to do to get you to where you want to be, whether that's working out more, whether that's going to sleep a half an hour earlier, whether that's eating better foods. Whatever it is that you need to do that's going to result or get you to the results that you want is what you should be doing more of. And then everything else, you're going to start to see it. That's just how the universe works, right? It's going to respond to the level of effort and work that you put into it. So the more that you do that, the more results you're going to see come back to you that are going to affirm that you're doing the right things.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned something that I want to touch upon, and that's the importance of spirituality. Now, as a former atheist, I remember whenever someone would even say the word God, or I would cut off. I would just, it would just, I was so anti, anti God. I couldn't wrap my mind around this concept that I was taught as a kid. So I've been on my own spiritual journey, and I have my connection with my source. So from your perspective, how important is spirituality in all of this?
I think for me, I can only speak for myself, right? Because as you mentioned, a lot of folks don't necessarily feel like, spirituality is as important to them. For me, it's critical. It's what gets me up in the morning and what gets me to bed at night. For me, I know that there's a higher power, whether that power's name is Jesus Christ, whether that power's name is Allah or Buddha or whoever. I know for a fact, because of my entire life is an example of it, that there is something that's bigger than all of us that's governing the universal laws. And I know that I am my best self the more I'm plugged into that source. And the more consistent I am with that, my life is going to reflect that consistency in terms of the gifts or the opportunities and the circumstances that become available to me. The more I stay plugged into that, the more I receive in return. But I'd also say that it's just as important to make as many deposits as you are withdrawals, right? So make sure that you're taking the time to, and I think God is in everything. God is in this conversation here. God is in you. God is in me. It's in nature. So living a life of good karma, living a life of good energy, treating people the right way, doing the right things as much as you can, of course, are all the deposits that I'm talking about that are going to reap their benefits down the line. So make sure that you're living life the right way, doing the things that you can, giving of yourself and of your time and of your resources, and all of those things start to come back. So all of that is spiritual in nature. It's not religious, right? Religion is something else. But spirituality is something that I think is innate in all of us. It just depends and looks different the way we exercise it individually.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. As mentioned, I remember I was a confirmed atheist for about 4 years, and I mean I was the guy that was reading the God Delusion book, and I was really into this. I just because I am very rational, logical, I couldn't get God to fit based on what I was taught as a kid. But I went on my own journey to find the God of my understanding. And as a result of that journey, I know that I have now created an intimacy and a connection with that which is greater than myself. And it literally is the driving force of my life. It's everything for me. So again, I in no way want to come across as preachy, but I do know that spirituality is a important, if not the most important component of being human. Because I believe that
Right.
we are spiritual beings having a human experience versus a human being having a spiritual
Right.
experience. So
Right.
listening to this, just find a path that works for you and connect to that, which is, again, you connect with and find something that really works for you. So last thing, Jason. So I want to give you an opportunity to share a message from the lives of men. For the men out there who are watching this, just inspire them, motivate them, whatever you feel moved to share with the men based on your concept of the life.
Absolutely. I'd say, I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. You are not alone. If you're looking for resources out there, and I'm not just talking about the lives of men, I'm talking about generally, there's a lot of resources out there. Your platform, Michael, is one of them that are creating, that exists solely to support you on your journey, whatever journey you might be on. So please don't feel like you're alone. Go out there, get on Google, research. There's a ton of stuff out there. So that's one thing. The second thing I'll say is anything is possible. Anything is possible so long as you believe and trust in yourself. I believe that all of us have been put on this earth to be extraordinary superstar, rock star individuals. And I'm not just talking about the rock stars that sing and dance on stage. I'm talking about really exceptional individuals. We all have a gift to offer the world. And it'd be a shame if you were to transition and never offer that gift to the world. You're setting the spirit of the world back significantly by you not offering that. And then the third thing is, as it relates to mental health, it's something that we do a lot of work on, is go out and get a therapist. There's nothing wrong with getting a therapist. Even if you feel fine, that's the time to go to therapy, right? Not when things are falling apart. So there's nothing wrong with that. Therapy is not a bad word. Go out there, find yourself someone to talk to, and really start to do the work inside of you that it's going to lead to you're living your best life. It's not going to happen outside first. It's going to happen with you first, and then everything else will reflect what's already inside.
And so I'll leave the audience with this quote. If you don't go within, you will always go without.
Absolutely.
You got to be willing to go within. So, Jason, how can people find out more about you? Where can they find you online, or what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so you can find us on all social media platforms. So that's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at The Lives of Men, and the website as well. So it's thelivesofmen.com.
Fantastic. Well, again, my brother, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad our paths have crossed. And as I mentioned, I don't believe in accidents. We were brought together for a divine purpose. And so it has been my pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I look forward to many more in the future.
Likewise, Michael, I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity and for the platform that you offered for me to share a little bit about myself and the work that I do. And hopefully someone was inspired today. So thank you, and you keep it up. You're doing good work, and I think it's much needed. So let's keep supporting one another.
All right. So this has been another episode of Shadow the Stereotypes. It's my honor and privilege to serve you, the audience. So take care, reach for the stars, know that anything is possible. We'll see you next episode.